The sun had barely risen over the city when Don Vito Caravello, the feared mafia boss whose name alone could make men tremble, paced restlessly in the marble-floored hall of his penthouse. His son, little Marco, lay unconscious in the room above, drifting in a haze no medicine seemed capable of piercing. 100 of the world's most renowned doctors had come and gone, each leaving with solemn faces, shaking their heads, muttering impossibilities. Yet for Don Vito, there was no space for despair. Failure was not an option. Rumors swirled in the city's underground that the Caravello heir would not survive, and with it, the influence and empire of the man whose smile could chill the blood of rivals. But fate, as it often does, had a strange way of rewriting rules. In the dim light of a forgotten alley in the poorer side of town, a young girl named Aaliyah wiped the sweat from her brow, her hands calloused from years of cleaning floors, scrubbing grime, and serving dishes, all while nurturing a mind that outpaced the brightest academicians she had only read about in dusty library books. Her genius was not the kind celebrated in boardrooms or university halls. It was raw, intuitive, and unshackled by conventional thinking. She had solved complex equations before she could ride a bicycle and understood the human body in ways that left even her teachers stunned. Yet society had confined her to menial labor, her talent invisible under the smudges of everyday survival. Aaliyah had heard whispers of the boy who could not be healed. At first, she dismissed them. What could a cleaning lady's daughter do against a disease that had defeated 100 experts? But then something stirred in her, a combination of curiosity, defiance, and the subtle pull of destiny. She approached the Caravello estate, her heart hammering, fully aware that a mafia don was not someone who welcomed strangers, especially children, into his sacred domain. Don Vito, perched like a hawk in his office, noticed her before anyone else. His eyes narrowed, a mixture of suspicion and amusement. "Who are you?" he demanded. Aaliyah spoke with a confidence that belied her age and circumstance. "I can help your son." The room erupted in laughter. Guards snorted, doctors exchanged smirks, and Vito's own wife whispered warnings. Yet there was something in her gaze, a fire that dared to defy fear itself, that made him pause. Against his better judgment, he allowed her entry. Aaliyah studied Marco, the boy's chest rising and falling with shallow, fragile breaths. She observed, touched, murmured words under her breath, eyes scanning every inch, noting irregularities the finest machines had failed to detect. Her hands moved with the precision of a master, balancing medicine, energy, and something far beyond the realm of textbooks. Hours passed, tension thickened the air like smoke from a raging fire. Then, as dawn broke for the second time that day, Marco's eyes fluttered open. Silence engulfed the room. Don Vito could only stare, the sound of his own heartbeat loud in his ears. Aaliyah had done the impossible. But as celebration loomed, shadows from the mafia world crept closer. Enemies, sensing weakness, began plotting. And the very doctors who had failed were unwilling to accept being overshadowed by a cleaning lady's daughter. Chapter 1 ended not in peace, but on the precipice of chaos, where genius and power, innocence and malice, were about to collide in ways no one could predict. Secrets Aaliyah never imagined she would uncover, hidden alliances, and a deadly conspiracy threatened to engulf her, Marco, and even Don Vito. Yet the spark of her intellect had ignited a revolution in that household, and nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed Marco's miraculous recovery were anything but peaceful. Don Vito Caravello, though outwardly composed, found his empire shifting beneath him like sand in a storm. News of the boy's revival spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the city, from the glittering penthouses to the murky back alleys, and with it came whispers, envy, and fear. Some hailed Aaliyah as a savior, others, especially the defeated doctors, saw her as a threat to their egos and influence. They began plotting behind closed doors, crafting schemes to discredit her, to prove that the miracle was either luck or deceit. But Aaliyah, though young, was far from naive. Her intelligence, honed by years of struggle, allowed her to anticipate every subtle move, every hidden dagger poised to strike. Yet danger took forms she could not have predicted. One night, as she walked through the city streets carrying a bag of essentials for Marco, she noticed shadows following her, figures moving with calculated precision, watching, waiting. Instinctively, she ducked into a narrow alley, heart racing, mind calculating escape routes and strategies faster than any algorithm. The followers disappeared, or so she thought, leaving her with a chill that went beyond the autumn air. Meanwhile, within the Caravello mansion, the dynamics had begun to shift. Don Vito, who had always relied on fear and intimidation, found himself respecting Aaliyah in ways that unsettled his entire household. His enforcers, initially dismissive, now watched her with wary eyes. They whispered about her power, a kind of intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. And then came the first true challenge. A rival mafia family, seeing vulnerability in the Caravello patriarch's astonishment at his son's recovery, decided to strike. They knew Aaliyah had a hand in the boy's health, and they wanted to exploit it. One evening, masked intruders broke into the estate, demanding the girl who had interfered with fate. Don Vito's guards confronted them, but the attackers were ruthless, trained killers with nothing to lose. In the chaos, Marco's life hung precariously, and Aaliyah, drawing on her unmatched ingenuity, created a defense no one could anticipate. Using a combination of improvised tactics, psychological strategy, and knowledge of human behavior, she turned the attacker's own plans against them. When the dust settled, not a single life had been lost, except for those plotting against her who now lay incapacitated, bewildered by the precision and calm of a girl barely into her teens. But victory was short-lived. The doctors who had failed Marco had not forgotten, and their resentment festered like a disease. They approached the Mafia Boss, offering their services once again, claiming that Aaliyah's methods were untested, dangerous, even illegal. Some tried to manipulate Don Vito, appealing to his pride, suggesting that the child of a cleaning lady could not possibly match the expertise of trained professionals. Yet Marco, now awake, aware, and forever changed by his brush with death, spoke in her defense, his voice trembling but firm. "She saved me," he said simply. "No one else could." The words carried a weight that silenced even the most cynical. Behind the scenes, Aaliyah continued her secret work, devising remedies, understanding the intricacies of medicine and the human body in ways that astonished even herself. But she also began uncovering dark secrets about the Caravello Empire, hidden crimes, betrayals, and the ghosts of violence that lingered like smoke in the corridors. Someone close to Don Vito had been undermining him, feeding information to rivals, and the moment of revelation was near. One stormy night, Aaliyah discovered coded messages tucked inside a seemingly innocuous ledger, a series of plans that revealed not only an impending attack on the family but also a betrayal that could destroy everything. Realizing the gravity, she approached Don Vito cautiously, knowing that revelation could trigger rage, suspicion, or even bloodshed. His reaction, however, surprised her. Instead of fury, he listened, absorbed the truth, and began a process of reshaping his approach to both power and trust. The father, once ruled solely by fear, was now learning to respect intellect, intuition, and courage, lessons delivered by someone society had overlooked. But the tension escalated further when Marco, inspired by Aaliyah's courage and brilliance, began to show signs of extraordinary abilities himself, quick thinking, unusual intuition, and a kind of emotional intelligence that both amazed and unnerved the adults around him. Rival factions took notice, sending spies and assassins under the cover of darkness, each move more dangerous than the last. Every night became a test of strategy, every day a balancing act between survival and moral choice. And yet, amidst the danger, a bond formed between Aaliyah and Marco, a partnership of mind and heart, intellect and resilience, forged in the fires of near-death and impossible challenges. The chapter closed with the looming presence of a mysterious figure who watched the Caravello mansion from afar, a person whose identity remained hidden, whose motives were unclear, and whose arrival promised twists so profound that no one, not even Aaliyah, could predict what the next day would bring. The city had never felt colder, darker, or more alive than the night the mysterious figure finally revealed themselves. Aaliyah, ever vigilant, had sensed the presence long before anyone else, but even her unmatched intellect had not predicted the full scope of what was coming. Don Vito, now both wary and fascinated by the girl who had rewritten his understanding of loyalty and power, stood beside her, his usual bravado tempered by respect and a hint of fear. The intruder entered the Caravello mansion not with guns drawn or threats shouted, but with a calm, unnerving authority that immediately drew everyone's attention. It was someone who had been thought long gone, presumed dead in an old feud, a former ally turned nemesis, who now sought revenge for past betrayals, a vendetta carried quietly over years of careful planning. They had studied Aaliyah as closely as the girl had studied Marco, aware that she was no ordinary child, and their plan relied on exploiting the few vulnerabilities even she possessed. But Aaliyah, her mind racing faster than ever before, anticipated every move. She manipulated the mansion's environment, using shadows, sounds, and even subtle changes in lighting to confuse and disorient the enemy, turning the space into a labyrinth of strategic advantage. Marco, inspired by her courage and guidance, assisted in ways that surprised everyone, demonstrating brilliance and courage far beyond his age. As the confrontation reached its apex, secrets long buried surfaced. Don Vito discovered who had betrayed him within his inner circle, a shocking revelation that threatened to destroy the foundation of his empire. Yet instead of succumbing to blind rage, he listened to Aaliyah's counsel, learning the power of patience, strategy, and calculated restraint. The enemy, realizing their carefully laid plan was unraveling, resorted to desperation, attempting to seize Marco as leverage. But Aaliyah, using a combination of quick thinking and scientific ingenuity, created a solution that neither brute force nor wealth could have achieved, a medical intervention that stabilized Marco while simultaneously neutralizing the threat, an act of genius that left even the enemy in awe. What followed was a series of revelations that shook the city. The doctors who had failed Marco were exposed for malpractice and envy-driven sabotage, their credibility destroyed. Rival mafia families, witnessing the combination of intellect, courage, and loyalty displayed by Aaliyah and Marco, reconsidered their ambitions, some forming alliances instead of waging war. Don Vito, transformed by the events, embraced a new leadership style, one that valued trust, strategy, and talent over fear alone. And Aaliyah, the black genius daughter of a cleaning lady, became a legend in her own right, a symbol of brilliance rising from obscurity, a mind capable of turning hopelessness into victory. But even as the immediate threats receded, Aaliyah knew that life would never be simple. Power attracted danger, brilliance attracted envy, and love and loyalty were tested in ways the world had yet to imagine. She had healed a boy that 100 doctors could not, outwitted enemies that countless men feared, and changed a mafia empire forever, but her journey had only begun. Marco, now awake, vibrant, and profoundly changed, looked at her with awe and gratitude, knowing that the bond they shared was not just of healer and patient, but of allies, partners, and friends who had faced death and emerged victorious. As the city's lights twinkled below, Aaliyah understood the truth that had guided her all along. Genius is not measured by wealth or recognition, but by the courage to act when the world says it is impossible. And in that moment, the impossible had become reality. She had not only healed a boy, she had healed a legacy, challenged a world built on fear, and claimed her place in history. And the story, whispered through the streets, promised that the impact of her brilliance would resonate far beyond the walls of the Caravello mansion, inspiring countless others who had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, proving that sometimes the smallest, most unassuming hands can shape the destiny of kings, criminals, and the world itself.